The Drive with Tim Donnelly here on 99.9 The Fan. It is a condensed week here with the holiday, so it is almost our kickoff celebrations continuing. We almost have NFL Week 1 kickoff. That's tomorrow with the Chiefs and the Lions. But we're also going into Week 2 of college football, and that's where Mike Glennon, my co-host with the Pack Therapy podcast, check it out everywhere podcasts can be found. Subscribe, like, all those sorts of things if you're a state football fan. Mike, we'll start with state. They beat UConn, so 1-0 is better than any of the other alternatives. But you and I, and we talked about this on Pack Therapy, there were things that made us a little less super excited than possible, and that's putting it kind of in the most reverse double negative, easy, soft way to put it. What's at the top of your list as far as state concerns heading into Notre Dame?
I think physicality up front. I think UConn's defensive line kind of pushed NC State's offensive line around, and NC State wasn't able to establish a run game. Brendan Armstrong had a lot of pressure on him. He was forced to scramble, ran the ball 19 times. I mean, those add up. And if UConn's able to push you around, then I'm worried what Notre Dame can do. And then on the flip side, NC State's defense did play well for the most part, but there were a few times where there were some big holes, and I know Notre Dame has one of the best offensive lines in the country. So physicality up front is my number one concern.
And it's interesting because on Pack Therapy last week we talked with Dan Orlovsky, who's a UConn legend, talking about his team. He said that last year he visited practice and training camp, brought his sons, and he went like, "Ooh, this doesn't necessarily look like a major Division I. Just eye test, vibe test, how big, how strong, how fast. This doesn't necessarily look like a Power 5 level football team." I know they're not in the Power 5, but that was kind of his observation. Then going this year, I should say, he'd gone to training camp and brought his kids again. He went, okay, this looks like a college football team, which if you look at how NC State played UConn over the last 2 years, that's what kind of stood out to me. Last year it looked like, oh, you can push this team around and you're going to win handily. This year it was, oh, they're winning in the trenches occasionally. And to me, that's kind of where the eye test comes into play. It's mostly in the trenches, right? And college football defensive line looks very different at the Power 5 level than at the Group of 5 level than at the FCS level and on down, because there just aren't that many big old monsters, right? And State has a few of them. Davin Van stands out. Notre Dame's going to have a bunch of them. So going into it's the physicality that stands out, maybe even more so than wide receiver depth or some of the other things.
Yeah, because I think it all starts up front, and there was a lot of times UConn's defensive line was on NC State's side of the line of scrimmage, which is not what you want when you're an offensive line coach. You want to see your guys driving them back, and it was kind of the opposite. So that is a concern of mine, and Notre Dame is historically known for being strong and physical and producing NFL offensive linemen, and that's kind of been their, the way they've won for the past, decades is having that run game, having those offensive line, and then that would be the number one thing. The number two thing, though, would be the receivers. And the passing game for this NC State offense has to be better than they were last week, because they're going to be having a matchup with Sam Hartman and this Notre Dame offense.
We're talking with Mike Glennon, former NC State quarterback and longtime NFL veteran, joining us here in studio on The Drive with Tim Donnelly. You brought up the name. This week is so much, especially from a fan interest standpoint, about Sam Hartman. A name that everyone in the ACC is very familiar with from his time at Wake Forest, but it's different now at Notre Dame. It's a different offense. It's different expectations. Everybody's very excited. They haven't exactly played a murderer's row through their first 2 games, but he's looked very good. How much different is Sam Hartman now than he was with Wake when everybody was getting to know him?
I don't think he's a different player. I mean, physically, he's talented. He's a very good quarterback, and he's been around for a while. He's probably more experienced than any other quarterback in college football.
History.
He goes from this offense in Wake Forest that is more of this whole slow mesh, that type of thing, to a typical pro-style offense, which I think is great for him in his future in the NFL. And so far, he's hit the ground running. He looks really good. He looks efficient. But he's coming into Carter Finley, and historically he hasn't played as well here. So maybe there's some PTSD.
Does it frustrate you as much as it frustrates me that they name all of these career records that he's breaking, And
It's terrible.
they never mentioned that he's playing his 6th year
Yeah.
of college football.
I think they need to go back, and they can erase the worst year. They need to take the top 4 years, and that's it. If you have more than 5 years, it's just not fair to me. And I love Chris Dunn, what he did at NC State last year, the kicker. He was breaking all these records, but he kicked for 5 years. Yep. I feel like you give the 4 best years and take away those extra. It just doesn't seem fair to everyone else.
Do a per year average or something, because I watched, obviously everyone did, the Notre Dame Navy game, which opened the season, and he passes Aaron Murray in this stat, he's closing in on Phil Rivers in this stat, he passed Colt McCoy in this stat, and he had 2 more years than all of those guys. They're before even you get the 4 games and still get to keep your red shirt, which is a little sketchy.
Yep.
But I feel like we do a better job of it in the NFL, right? When Cooper Kupp was approaching Calvin Johnson, all anyone was saying was it's a 17-game season now in the career yards, a single-season yards record. Nobody mentions it ever for Sam Hartman. Sam Hartman's a very good quarterback. He is the ACC all-time touchdowns pass leader, and now he's playing a 6th year outside the ACC. I just think it needs to be mentioned when we're talking about the records. It needs, there's context for it all. It seems a little disingenuous.
I think another interesting thing is now with all these schools being added, and he didn't play long enough there at Cal, but like Aaron Rodgers, do all those guys' records now just transfer over into the ACC?
I don't know. I know that they did and this is another, is suddenly the best ACC quarterback of all time John Elway? Does that happen? It might be like John Elway, Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck.
I know ACC Hall of Fame, every ACC championship, they bring in guys.
And they honored.
And like last year, I think it was Donovan McNabb.
They honored, I've seen Dan Marino honored by the ACC for Pitt. And I guess that would actually make a better argument for bringing in Stanford and Cal if you get to bring in Stanford and Cal's history.
Yeah.
If suddenly
Andrew Luck's going to be at the ACC championship getting honored.
If you have to show like the Stanford band play on ACC highlight films. That's like the NFTs. That's like the worth bringing in the highlight, almost more so than bringing in current Stanford program. I don't know how all that's going to work. All I know is Sam Hartman is going to break a lot of records, and I don't think he actually has earned them. Phillip Rivers is a perfect example. Phillip Rivers started 4 years, beginning as a freshman, never lost his job, never had Jamie Newman come in and take any of his reps, and just cranked out stats his entire career. And then Sam Hartman's going to pass him in all the stat categories. It just doesn't seem extremely fair. Quickly about let's talk about the ACC. Stanford and Cal and SMU not in there yet, but the teams that are remaining. There's seemingly, a very, very wide open run. Florida State they looked the best of the bunch, but we've seen Florida State have great showings and then fall off a little bit in the past. What's your take on the horizon in the ACC?
Yeah, Florida State looked really good. I think with Jordan Travis and the playmakers that they have around him, they are clearly the team to beat in the ACC, and they truly could make a run in the college football playoff if they play the way they did the other night. After that, there's a drop off, and Clemson, they don't look the same. They don't have the dudes on the outside that they have. When I was here, we were playing Sammy Watkins, DeAndre Hopkins, Martavius Bryant, Adam Humphries. Those guys are no longer there,
and it keeps going. They had a run with receivers from Renfro and
T. Higgins,
Justin
Williams.
Ross when he was at the top of his game. It was impressive.
It has fallen off, and at the same time, we talk about Taj Boyd, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. Cade Klubnik right now does not look like that. He does have the skill set. You see the athleticism. You see the arm talent.
The reason why he was such a high recruit and all that. Yep.
Right now, he looks antsy to me. It just isn't. He's just not playing at that level that Clemson is used to.
Yeah, the game hasn't slowed down for him yet, which I think was the most impressive thing about Trevor Lawrence is he stepped in and the game looked slow, and it's like, wow, he didn't even need that moment where it clicked, and Klubnik is waiting for that moment where it clicked.
He plays too fast to me.
Yeah.
It seems like he is like 1, 2, 3. It's all going through his head too fast. It's like calm down, let the play develop, and if it's not there, then take off. Don't immediately just get back in the pocket, scramble around. So he's got a little ways to go. You do see the talent there. So if it clicks, they could come on hot.
That's Mike Glennon, my co-host on the Pack Therapy podcast. If you want Mike's thoughts on more in-depth NC State football topics, check out Pack Therapy everywhere podcasts can be found and our YouTube page and subscribe while you're there. Appreciate it, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Tim.